Hi, Paul. So, just a quick question about the youth, because we've seen a growing trend of our academy players coming through. Just Alzate, White, Sanchez, Connolly, Dunk, obviously about a decade ago. Is this a taste of the future, a very much a youth-focused setup going forward?
I hope so because we've invested a huge amount of money in the training facilities at Lancing and the academy, and Category One academy requires a huge amount of staff, which cost a huge amount of money. So we're investing certainly in excess of £5-6 million a year in our academy. So generating returns on that investment are about bringing players through to the first team, and it's not necessarily, as I said before, about just our first team. It could be other clubs' first teams because we are in a position where, as a Premier League club, we want to be able to use our academy players in our first team group. But if they don't make that level, then they're certainly going to be valuable assets for us to sell to either other Premier League clubs or Championship clubs or to overseas clubs. So generating returns on our academy are very much an important part of our future development. And that's one of the reasons that we hired Dan Ashworth. It's one of the reasons that we've invested a huge amount in our facilities at Lancing and in our coaching staff. So we've got a lot of work to do. And, the academy, as I said earlier, is still relatively new and still relative in its infancy in terms of development. But some very encouraging signs this season.
Was that the one of the main reasons you brought in Graham Potter as a target? I know you kind of looked at him, the board looked at him for a couple of years beforehand, but he's got a track record of doing very well with young players coming through. Was that one of the key reasons he was brought in?
Well, I think Graham would be the first to say that he will simply use the best players that he considers available at any given time. And when he was at Swansea, I think he established a reputation for bringing young players through. But that wasn't just because he was about bringing young players through. It was because Swansea sold a lot of players, so he didn't have an awful lot of choice in some cases. And again, he would be on the first to say that. But he does trust young players, and you've seen that this season. And if they're good enough, he'll play them, and he's not at all afraid of putting young players forward where it's appropriate and where he thinks they're ready. But at the same time, if they're not quite ready, or if he thinks they need more development, he's not afraid to push them out on loan either. So again, these things, are not just the decision of Graham. There's a team of people that decide, when players are right for our first team group and when they need to go out for further development, and also when they need to come back. And that will vary from player to player in quite a big way. And sometimes we have to be very patient with young players because they don't always develop at the rate that we predict they'll develop at, and others will come through much faster. So again, it's not an exact science. It's a difficult business, managing and developing humans to be elite athletes. And unfortunately, they don't always follow the pathway that you might expect.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned briefly about players that don't quite meet the level you expect, and then they get sold off, and that kind of helps recoup some money for the academy. What about players that do become first team regulars? Do you think potentially, we've not been a selling club at all in recent years, we've kept hold of our talents the best we can, but with the impacts of the pandemic as well, could we potentially see some youth players go, even if they are in the first team?
Well, it's not necessarily because of the pandemic that would happen. It would happen as part of our evolution as a Premier League club. And there will be a time when we decide that it's right to sell a player that otherwise, perhaps previously, we might have kept for longer. And that's about the confidence of the players coming behind them. It's about a given point in time in that position. There might well be 2 or 3 players that we feel have got as much ability or potentially more ability. It might be that the offer is too good to refuse. It might be that the player themselves want to move to play at a higher level or in a different environment. So there's a whole bunch of reasons that could come into play at any one time. But I don't think we should ever be afraid of selling players, although it's not something, again, this particular most recent generation of fans have necessarily seen too much of, as you said. But it's not something to be afraid of. It's what big clubs do. Even the biggest clubs do it, and they're not afraid to do it because they're confident in their ability to replenish and develop behind. So I'm sure that we'll see some of it, but we've got no immediate plans to do any of it.
Hi, Paul. Good to see you. Always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Obviously, we've got the big game coming up tonight. A huge game we're all looking forward to. Josh and I will be on the watch along later on this, so that could be fun. Received the programme through the post, which, by the way, is a really good idea, having kept those going during lockdown. So hats off to you for that, one amongst many other good initiatives. in the programme, in your notes, I had a quick look through just in prep for this, and much as there is a huge number of really good things going on with the club, one thing you're probably kind of heavily heartedly having to deal with is all the matters around online abuse. Obviously, we've had a number of national situations have been going on with players from around the country. In terms of what you mentioned in your notes, is that there's a lot of stuff you've had to monitor from fans of other clubs. I think you said hundreds of messages you're having to take down off the platforms associated with the club. And obviously, as you also mentioned in your programme notes, unfortunately, you've had to ban somebody for a couple of years for something they've said, an Albion fan. How stressful is this? It must be. It's going off the scale, isn't it now? Both for things you have to deal with and in terms of the issue as a whole. How frustrating is this?
It's very frustrating, Russell, because it's totally avoidable. Things that I find most stressful, the club finds most stressful, things that are avoidable. Things that are unavoidable, we deal with. And, the pandemic is unavoidable. We have to deal with it. It's stressful, but we deal with it. I think when it comes to online abuse, it's unacceptable. In many cases, it's childish, it's pathetic. We look at it and most of us shake our heads at some of the nonsense that we see. But there gets to a point where, unfortunately, action has to be taken. And it won't just be us, it will be other clubs, it will be other authorities. But what we can't do is allow our name and our reputation and our identity and our values to be dragged into things by other people that have no authority or responsibility to do that. We have to actually act in those situations, and we will. And there will be other authorities now that will do more and quicker. And I think, sooner or later, someone will unfortunately either have their liberty taken away, or they will be finding themselves in court for whatever reason, because somebody has decided to draw a line under what they've said or what they've done and take some really serious action. And, what we've said is we want people to avoid that by just simply being sensible. And most of the things that get said would never get said to someone's face. They would never get said to the person if they were standing in front of them. And yet, for some reason, people think that social media and message boards and anonymity gives them this right to abuse people, discriminate against people, attack people, bully people, and just be generally abusive, which is just unacceptable. And this club won't allow that to happen where our name is mentioned or is connected in any way. And we've said for several weeks now that we will take action. And unfortunately, sometimes you have to take action for people to believe that you'll take action. And unfortunately, in the last couple of weeks, we've had to do that. We've done it several times, actually. One or two have made headlines, one or two haven't. But unfortunately, no matter how many times we seem to get this message out there are one or two people that don't seem to be taking it too seriously.
Yeah, and it's a very robust, but I think a very fair response, both in what you said in the media initially and in these notes that I've just mentioned. To what degree do you think Twitter, Instagram, etc., are not quite stepping up to the plate, shall we say?
Well, they've got to do more, but it comes back to the point we were making earlier about how we treat women and girls. It's down to individuals, isn't it? We can blame platforms and we can blame technology, but they're not writing this stuff. It's individuals writing this stuff. So, True. For me, and as I said in my notes, we get as depressed and as frustrated by some of the idiotic justification for what's said or what's done. Excuses, or I was goaded, or I was this, or I was that. It's just nonsense. If you can't be sensible on social media, stay off of it. If you can't, write something without discriminating or being abusive or being bullying, don't go on there. It's quite simple. No one needs to run their life through social media. So, if you don't want to lose season tickets, or don't want to lose the right to come to games, or don't want to end up on a criminal charge, don't abuse. Don't go on there and do the things that we've asked you not to do, and not just us, but the Premier League, the government, the social media companies themselves. There's always more that could be done, but the responsibility starts and ends for me with the individual.
And just on one happier note, if I can ask another question, fans returning to stadiums, looks like it's finally going to be on the horizon now. Obviously, with the dates that were given by the government, it stipulated that falling into the time frame, the final game of the season might be in front of fans. There's obviously an initiative to try and get a second game played by the end of the season, if one is, then two are. How dedicated are you to that notion? Should there be any fans at all this season in those last 1/2 games? And where are we at with it? Because I know we're governed by the government's statements, aren't we? Really, but
Sure.
what's
well, first of all, if
it looking
it's
like?
safe, we would love to have fans back, and we've been pushing as probably the club that's pushed the hardest since the pandemic began to have the right, when it's safe to do so, to have fans back in the stadium. And certainly if we get the chance for the Manchester City game to have fans at the Amex, then we certainly will do everything possible to get them there. Whether that's 20% or 25% of our capacity, whether that's with various mitigations, whether it's face masks or distancing in the stadium or whatever it happens to be, we're ready to do whatever the government want us to do. But I think getting fans back into the stadium sooner rather than later, provided it's safe and provided that the government measures have been met and the markers have been met, then we're very much for it. And equally, if it comes down to just the final game of the season with fans, we wouldn't oppose that either. We've been fortunate this season to have fans in the stadium for 2 Premier League games when others have had fans in the stadium for none at all. So I think it would be a little bit churlish of us to deny other clubs the chance to host games with fans if it simply comes down to one game. But I think the Premier League's plan is to have the final 2 games of the season with fans. It means that the fixtures will be jiggled around a little bit towards the end of the season if that happens. But we would be certainly supportive of either measure.
In terms of the fans in stadiums, I've got a question here from Stateside Seagull. He's curious on your thoughts on the increased global audience for the Albion. Obviously, through the Premier League, there's a huge amount of eyes put on the team as opposed to before. How have you, the attention globally, how has that meshed with Albion still obviously being so focused on the local community and being so great at still being a community club? How have you found that? Is it a fine line trying to mesh those two together with all the eyes across the world now?
It's a positive. It's a big bonus. We've got global partners like American Express and Nike that benefit hugely from the increased global exposure we get from being in the Premier League generally, but also particularly during the pandemic. We're obviously having every game live on TV in the UK as well. So the exposure is fantastic, and it's good for the club. But with that comes responsibility, and it comes back to the subject we were just talking about with Russell. The bigger our exposure, the higher our profile, the more responsibility we have to act properly at all times. And unfortunately, it means that when things do go slightly wrong, and again, we're talking about a minority of individuals here, tiny minority of individuals. The vast majority of football fans of every club, simply use social media as fun and ways of communicating, interacting, and having fun with other football fans. But the tiny minority, when it goes wrong, bring us into disrepute. And we don't just get brought into disrepute in this country. It's a global thing because of the global profile that comes with the Premier League. So, it adds that responsibility as well. But overall, the positives are huge and absolutely outweigh any negatives there might be there.
Just touching on the club's current position in the Premier League, obviously near the bottom of the table. We're all very ambitious that we're going to stay up this season, and we're very hopeful of that. But how would, if we did get relegated, how would it impact the club financially? And how has the club been preparing for that possibility?
Well, first of all, in professional sport, you don't prepare publicly for the negatives. You prepare internally for any eventuality. But what you must always do is to make sure that you're prudently looking ahead in lots of different ways. So it's not just about staying up. It's about, if we do stay up, and when we do stay up, what do we want to do next season? What is our objective again next season? If the worst were to happen, we're a resilient club. And as the chairman has said on many occasions, on a long journey towards becoming a top 10 Premier League club, there's going to be bumps in the road. I said it earlier in this interview. That's just the nature of top level sport. But our focus at the moment, first of all, is tonight's game, and then it will be the break, and then it will be coming back and focusing on the remaining games of the season. And each one of those is important. And tonight's game's important, but then so are all the remaining games. You still only get the 3 points for tonight, even if it was to be the best result for us possible. So it is a big game, but it's no bigger than the other remaining games that we've got.
How involved do you get on a match day? Do you celebrate the goals scored and the wins, or are you kind of quite chilled out about that?
No, celebrate like anyone else. Football has been my life for a very, very long time, and it's impossible not to get involved in the emotion. It's part of my job to stay as calm as I can from a business and operational point of view on a match day, because the chairman's the fan. I let him enjoy the game more. But of course, the results mean everything to us, and not just to the staff, to the players, but to the staff as well. The staff, are building their careers in football, and when you work in an industry, no matter what industry it is, you want to be working at the top of that industry. And football club staff are no different. So everybody in the club pulls together on a match day. Everybody in the club pulls together in between matches, because we want to do whatever we can to give the team the best possible chance of winning football matches. And that is what our sole purpose is, from early hours of Monday morning when the working week starts, right the way through to the final minutes of any given match, when we're looking to do what we can to help the team.
Mm-hmm. We had a Bruno on earlier, and he was talking about how we can stay together during the tough times when the run of form isn't as great as we'd hope it to be. Is that the same in the boardroom? Is that same kind of ambition and the togetherness reflects in the boardroom as well, and the attitude to try and kind of keep going when things aren't so easy?
100%. And it's our job to not get too high on the wins, and certainly not to get too low on the losses, because it's important that we maintain our perspective and our focus, and make sure that we do everything we can to deliver the vision over a longer period of time, not just game to game or season to season. So the board, as I said earlier, has been together now nearly for 10 years. It's very stable. We know each other. We've got a huge amount of talented and experienced people on the board. We've got a very, very experienced senior staff at the club now that between them have literally got hundreds of years of experience in the football industry. So, we're very fortunate to have this group together at this particular time. I think the club's in very good shape for the future.
And then a bit of a light-hearted one. As a Tottenham fan yourself, and then you were working there as an executive director earlier in your career, what's it like on a match day against Tottenham? Of course, we beat them earlier this season. What's it like for you?
Well, for me, there is only one result when we play Tottenham, and that's a Brighton win, I'm afraid. And that's always been my focus whenever I've worked in football. The club that is paying my wages and that I lead at any given time is the most important club, and that I don't waver on that. And frankly, when Tottenham arrive, it's nice to see some of my old colleagues and so on. But other than that, they're just like any other team that comes to the Amex or that we're playing away from home. I want to beat them as much as any other team, perhaps not as much as Arsenal, but almost as much as any other team. And from that point of view, that's I think it's really important when you work in football that your entire focus is with the club that is your club. And in this case, my club is 100% Brighton. It has been for coming up 9 years now, and we've played Tottenham a few times in that period of time. And I can tell you that all of the directors at Tottenham are under no illusion where my focus is and where my priority is on those match days.
That's great to hear.
On the Spurs theme, I was going to ask as well, actually, Paul, just because we don't hear your football opinion side so much, obviously, with capacity of what you do for a living. But who were your idols growing up then? Were we talking the Hoddles and Ardilis?
Oh, yeah, for sure. I mean, I was lucky enough when I was a kid to be taken to a lot of youth team and reserve team games with my dad, and Glenn Hoddle was coming through the ranks at that time. So, it was incredible for me that I ended up working with Glenn when I was with the FA and he was the England coach, and just to work with one of your idols is an incredible privilege. And he was certainly one of the greatest players that I've ever seen play live and watch train. And even when we were together at the FA and I watched England training sessions that he was in charge of, he was still probably the best player around that training session, and he was the coach. So, but yeah, Glenn was a big idol. Peter Taylor, of course, I really enjoyed watching Peter play for Spurs as well. And again, worked with Peter when I was with the FA, and he became England's head coach for a game away in Italy. And of course, Ozzy, who's a very, very close friend, is a fantastic footballer and was someone I admired hugely watching growing up as a kid. And again, it's incredible how life somehow brings you together with your idols. And in Ozzy's case, he became an ambassador for the club when I was at Spurs, and just one great guy and a fantastic gentleman, a World Cup winner. And again, to work with people like that is absolutely fantastic. But we've also done I think at Brighton, a fantastic job, in recent years in making sure that we bring some of our former players back into the fold and keep working with them, and going all the way back to Alan Mullery and making sure that Alan is very much part of our club. Gordon Greer is still very much part of our staff, and we've obviously got Bruno now on the coaching staff. We're in close contact with Caldy. We've got Andrew Crofts on the coaching staff. We've got Casper on the coaching staff, and this is all part of a philosophy that Tony and I have been pursuing now for nearly a decade, of making sure that the club's culture is very, very deep rooted, and it doesn't matter too much from when we change the head coach or managers. We obviously hope Graham's going to be here for a long time to come, but when eventually he moves on, because eventually he will, the roots of the club and the roots of the culture of the club are very deep. So things don't have to change. And that's one of the great things about this football club, is that we've established a really firm base and a really firm foundation to the future.
We talk about Graham Potter there and hoping he stays for as long as possible. He's clearly doing a fantastic job of all the performances in the Premier League. It's some of the best football we've witnessed as fans in a very long time. But yet some fans still aren't happy, and you see some people calling for Graham Potter out. How do you react to that as the board? Because me personally, I'm like, come on, guys, this is ridiculous. We're playing really good football and we're in a good position.
We don't listen to stuff like that, and it would be nonsensical to listen to stuff like that. We're very fortunate that we've got a coach that is highly regarded throughout English and European football, that has overseen a very significant transition in the way we play, and that's not in any way to criticise or demean what Chris Hughton did for us, because Chris did a fantastic job for us over nearly half a decade, and we wouldn't be where we are now if it hadn't been for Chris's contribution along the way. But we wanted Graham to do something different for us. And, the speed at which he's done it, the confidence with which he's done it, the quality of the performances that have come with it, I think has shocked quite a lot of people across football. And, there's always going to be fans that focus on results. That's just the nature of football. And it's a game of opinions, and everyone's entitled to their opinion. And their, opinions that are not our opinions are no less valid because they're different to ours. But, we can't allow ourselves to listen to people that have a particular agenda or a particular opinion that is different, because our job is to steer the club, and our job is to be the custodians of the club at this point in time. And, in that respect, we believe Graham is by far the best person for the job, and, hope he will be for many years to come.
Yeah, I think we've had an awful lot of your time, Paul. I just have a couple more questions from the team here on Twitch that are throwing out questions left, right, and center. One of them is Robert Sanchez. I'm sure the club must be delighted with his progression in the last 6 months, which is just insane. When it comes to international call-ups and stuff like that, is that something that's discussed from the top down, or is that something that's solely his choice? Like, does he come to you all and say, this is the conversation I've had? How does that go about, especially for these young players that is kind of hitting them like a whirlwind? What does the club do to help them?
For most people, of course, they don't have the luxury of choice. They are the nationality that they're born with. In Rob's case, he was fortunate that he could have gone one of two ways, and he's opted to play for the country in which he was born, Spain, and obviously we're thrilled for him, and to be called into a squad and keep out one of the world's most expensive goalkeepers as part of that is an incredible achievement for someone so young. But at the same time, it's fantastic recognition for how well he's done this season, the progress that he's made. But Rob's been with us since he was 15, and we've always been very, very aware of his great talent, and we've always been very excited about what he could achieve and the potential that he could fulfill. And Ben Roberts, our goalkeeping coach, has long had Rob very, very, very highly rated, and it's really good to see him come through to the first team. Really good to see him play such an important part in what we've done this season, and even better to see him now get international recognition as well. And we really hope that he gets minutes on the pitch and plays games as well. But certainly, if young players want to talk to us about what they should do and which route they should take, then of course people like Dan Ashworth and Graham, myself, or the chairman will always be happy to talk to young players about their international futures. But quite a few of them are also well guided by their parents and their agents, and and other people as well. So, it's a combined effort, but in most cases, people don't have the luxury of that choice.
Here's a random one. Can you ask what the new building attached to the main building is in the training ground?
The new building attached to the main building. Well, the new building is a significantly enhanced gym and sports therapy center. Hesitate to use the word spa because it makes it sound like a holiday camp. It's certainly not that. But we've invested significantly in improving the facilities that we have there for players to prepare for games and also to recover from games. We've also built a separate building for our women and girls football operations and also for some of our community facilities where we stage community activities at the training ground. So, we'll be one of the few Premier League clubs to integrate all of our football operations on one site. We've expanded the number of pitches that we've got. We've expanded the size of the sports performance facilities, and as I say, we've added our women and girls operations there as well. So this summer will be a very busy period for the training ground when we reintegrate all of our teams, men, women, boys and girls, into one site. So it's going to be a very, very busy summer for us in opening all of those different facilities.
All right, cool. I think we're probably good to let you go. Final question. Do you have a pre-match ritual?
Do I have one? Well, it's been a little bit different. I mean, first of all, I've been fortunate enough to attend every match bar one since I joined the club. So I think tonight is something like 425, 426 consecutive matches. And I only missed one game, the West Brom home game, because my wife unfortunately tested positive. So I had to isolate for a period of time. But other than that, my ritual really is to try and be at the stadium on a normal match day, sort of 3 or 4 hours before kickoff. So I'll be heading there literally as soon as we're finished here. Normally we would be entertaining the visiting directors, but at the moment, of course, we're staying socially distant from them. So it's a bit difficult to do that. But then, it's time to spend with the chairman and with Dan. But really my responsibilities on the match day when fans are there are quite different because, I've got the overall legal responsibility for the stadium on a match day and all that goes in it. But yeah, the most important thing on a match day is the football for the fans and hopefully 3 points. So unfortunately, that's something I can't take direct responsibility for. But I certainly sit there hoping and praying like everyone else that we get them.
Last question. What's your go-to meal deal?
Meal deal. Oh dear, that's a good question. I think it really depends on my mood. I try and eat as healthily as possible and try and run most days to make sure that I can. But I don't really have a go-to meal deal. But I do quite like to get out and have Indian and Thai food when I can.
I love
Good
that.
stuff. Thank you so much for coming on, Paul. We've
taken
a full hour of your time, so we really, really appreciate it.
And thanks to everyone for your support during this difficult period. I know that it's hard being away from the stadium, but the support that we get, whether it's emails or messages into the club, is really appreciated by everyone and particularly by Graham and the players. So thank you for that. And we hope to get everyone back, if not for Manchester City, then certainly for the start of next season.
Thank you.
No problem.
Brilliant.
Nice to see you guys. Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye.